Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and you're very welcome to the Desmond Theatre here in the RCSI University of Medicine and Health Sciences. My name is Kieran O'Boyle. I'm the director of the new Centre for Positive Psychology and Health. And it's my great privilege to welcome you firstly this evening and also to introduce our chair for this evening's proceedings. So Dr. Ciara Kelly really needs no introduction, I think. Ciara is an award-winning columnist with the Sunday Independent and a well-known TV and radio broadcaster. She presents Lunchtime Live from 12 to 2 on News Talk, and she was previously the medical expert for 5 seasons on the nation's leading health show, Operation Transformation, on RT1. Ciara began her media career when she first started to write for the Sunday Independent. And the great thing about Ciara and what makes her doubly welcome here tonight is that she is herself a family physician. So without further ado, Dr. Ciara Kelly.
This one working? Good evening. Thank you very much, Kieran, and thank you very much for inviting me to be the chair, and I will be the chair across the series that we will be doing on positive health here of public lectures at the RCSI. Tonight we will speak in particular about the value of exercise and of nutrition on human health. Lifestyle medicine is something I think that there is an increasing evidence base for, that if we do some simple things that change our lifestyle in terms of how often we move, how much we sleep, what we eat, cutting out certain noxious substances, we can really make a difference to our health. And I think very much the focus is shifting from illness to wellness for a lot of people in society, and I suspect that's why we have such a good crowd here this evening. People want to be empowered and want to engage with the idea of what they can do themselves for their health. And I think that is what the RCSI are doing, and doing very well. They are engaging with people and telling them and showing them and helping them to see evidence-based initiatives that people can introduce to their own lives to improve their health and to empower them to make the good decisions. It's all about making the good decisions, but making those good decisions a little bit easier to make. First up, our speaker tonight is Professor Suzanne McDonough, and she is the head of the physiotherapy school here at RCSI. And I could read, and I did say to Suzanne that I could read a list of accolades, because she's incredibly accomplished in her academic career. And she said, no, distill it down to the fact that she is a professor of physiotherapy and she does run the school, but she's research-based, and she's all about how physical activity can really be the game changer in terms of our health. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Professor Suzanne McDonough.
So thanks very much, Ciara, and it gives me great delight to be here today and to see so many of you here at this event. So the first thing I wanted to do, hopefully everybody's had a chance to get menti.com on their phones. I'll give you a couple of minutes 30 seconds probably if you haven't already done it. And the reason I'm getting you to do this is I kind of just want to get a gauge of what kind of audience we have. And just to reassure you, this is entirely anonymous. I will absolutely have no idea who's given what answers. And as somebody said to me, is this a quiz? It's not a quiz. Well, it's not an exam. You don't have to pass anything. So if I'm just going to move on then to my first slide then. Okay, so this is just a test question. Oh, so very few if you aren't sure about whether you're happy or not. That's quite reassuring. So hopefully everybody just gets the idea. So you go in, you answer the question, and then you hit submit, and then it'll come up on the screen. I don't know how many of you have used this before, but it just is a quite nice way for you to interact with me. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next one now. So the next question you have is, have you ever had physiotherapy? This is a great ad for physiotherapy, I think. Possibly. So lots of people in the audience then have had physiotherapy. So I'm going to move on to the next one. So again, for what kind of things have you had physiotherapy? So again, just to give me a sense of where people are coming from in the audience. So even though we're getting lots, I can see back pain is not going to disappear. And that doesn't surprise me at all, because back pain is very common. And particularly in people, typically 30s to 40s, start to experience back pain. Yeah, so it's still there. And then the last question I have for you just at this point in time, so I'm going to move on, if that's okay, my next question is, are you aware of the physical activity guidelines? So again, I just want to get a sense of what people in the audience know. And remember, I don't know what you're putting on there. Nobody else knows, unless they can see your phone. Okay, so a pretty mixed bunch. So yes, and certainly work we've done with physiotherapists is they would answer yes, but then when you ask them what the guidelines are, that's when it falls apart a little bit sometimes. So I'm not going to ask you what the guidelines are. I'm not going to put you under that pressure. So I'm going to come out of this for now, and we'll come back to this later, and I'm going to then just share my slides. But the first thing I want to talk about is, and I guess many of you have come here because you probably know this is pretty important for your health, I would imagine. So physical activity, if it were a drug, we would say it's a wonder drug because it actually treats so many things. You'd actually go, well, can that possibly be true? So it can prevent over 21 different conditions or diseases, and it also helps us manage over 35 different conditions or diseases. And certainly as a physiotherapist, it's the main part of our arsenal. And many of you, if you have been for physio, it's very likely that you've either been given some kind of exercise or increasingly some type of physical activity, because physiotherapists are playing a bigger role in that all the time. The effect of physical activity, it can reduce your risk of having diabetes, cardiovascular disease, falls and depression by over 30%. If you're physically active, there's a lot of evidence that it prevents you from getting musculoskeletal pain, and it also plays a big role in preventing certain types of cancer. So what is physical activity? Now I'm going to go through this just so we're all on the same page, because often there's a lot of confusion between physical activity, exercise. You might be hearing the word sedentary now and you're going, what does that mean? So physical activity is any movement produced by our muscles that increases our energy expenditure. So you'll know yourself, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, but if you start walking quite quickly, you start getting warm. So your energy expenditure is going up. So the diagram there is just showing you physical activity on a continuum. So we have sleep, which is at the lowest level. Then we have sedentary. Now, sedentary is a very specific. It is when you're sitting during the day, low levels of energy expenditure. Then moving up to light, and then moderate to vigorous. Now, most of what we know in terms of the evidence actually is around moderate to vigorous physical activity, or you might hear the term MVPA. So a lot of what we know about is at that end, so the health benefits of it. And there is some work now coming out about the benefits of light physical activity. And also, I'm going to be talking a little bit about sitting, but what do we know? But probably not half as much as we know about moderate to vigorous physical activity. Physical activity is everything you do in your day. So it captures absolutely everything. So from bringing your rubbish out, doing your hoovering, cycling to work, what you do at work, and then your leisure sports pursuits. Now, often people think it's just the leisure sports or that it's exercise, but it's not. It's anything. You get physical activity doing your hoovering. So next time you have to clean the house, think of it in a positive way. That's really actually good for your health. Exercise, on the other hand, is it's a subset of physical activity, and it tends to be structured, planned, repetitive, and used to improve or maintain your physical fitness. About 20 years ago, I was very interested in what would happen to people's physical activity. So these were people with low back pain, and I guess there's a lot of people in the audience with that problem. If we got people to come into an exercise class, and this was the gold standard at the time for management of back pain, and pretty much still is. So physiotherapists, supervised group-based exercise class, they were coming in twice a week, and we wanted to know what would happen to their habitual physical activity, that day-to-day activity. So what we did was we put a little device on their thigh that measured all of the physical activity they did and their sleep. We measured it for 7 days before we started the exercise class, and then they did it over a period of 12 weeks. And then we measured it at the end. And this is a pretty typical profile you can see up here for activity. So we spend a lot of our time sitting in the yellow. We spend a certain amount of time standing, and we spend quite a small amount of our time actually walking. And of course we expected that it would change. So I'm going to show you what actually happened. And as you can see, pretty much nothing happened. So we were incredibly disappointed with that outcome. But what we did is we actually spoke to people. We were trying to really understand, well, how on earth did that happen? So we spoke to them, and what people said to us was they viewed the exercise class like any other form of physiotherapy. So you come into the class, you commit to it, you do it, and then it finishes and you just go back to normal. And absolutely nothing changes. And even though we were trying to give people a message, we felt we were giving them the message about being active in their daily lives. We weren't helping them to actually do it. And we thought about it as a team, and what we decided was this wasn't the way to go. If we really wanted to encourage people with health conditions to be active for life, so to develop the habit, we needed to come at it from a totally different perspective. So we started thinking about walking. And why walking? Well, walking, we all can walk. We don't have to teach you how to do it. It doesn't cost any money, so everybody can walk. And it's a very low risk of injury. So even somebody who's quite inactive, it's very safe for them to be walking. So I'm going to go on to the guidelines now. So walking is recommended in the guidelines as one of the ways, if you're very inactive, that you can start to become active. But what the guidelines actually are saying, and I'm going to talk about three things from the guidelines. I'm going to talk about the 150 minutes. I'm going to talk about the building strength. And I'm going to talk about breaking up your sitting time. So I'm going to start with the 150 minutes first. So if you look at the guidelines, what they're saying is 150 minutes per week at a moderate intensity. So again, what does that actually mean? Some of you may know what that means already, and some of you might be a little bit unsure. So looking at this continuum of energy expenditure, moderate, you can see, is in there in the middle. And that really is where you start to breathe a little bit harder, you start to get a little bit warmer, your heart rate goes up a little bit, you might start sweating. So when I do my walk up from the O'Connell Street up to here in the morning, by the time I get here, I might be a little bit hot. And then I know I've been working then at a moderate level. And that's where we want, that's most of what we know, starting from moderate up to vigorous in terms of our 150 minutes. Now, the 150 minutes itself, now some of you, I don't know where you're sitting with this, but some of you may be doing that already. We've done a whole lot of studies across different clinical populations, and some of the people we worked with were very far away from 150 minutes. And in fact, if we were doing education at the beginning of any of our studies, we probably wouldn't even put the 150 minutes up, because I think sometimes people feel they're so far away that what's the point? It just seems too big a hill to climb. So I think what's important and what we try to do is to actually move people up a category. So if we have somebody who's very sedentary or just doing a little bit of light activity, what we want to do is move them up a little bit so they're doing a little bit more. And we might move them from sedentary to light, and we might move them from light into a little bit of moderate, and that's a really good place to start. Now, the reason that's a good place to start, this is a really important figure. So I'm just going to orientate you, and I'm going to just come around here because I'm going to find it easier, and remember to take this with me. So just to orientate you, so this is increasing health benefits along here, and this is increasing minutes along here. So what you can see is as you increase the minutes you do in a week, you will increase your health benefits. Now, where the guidelines are is 150 minutes. Now, they would even say in the guidelines, this is an arbitrary figure, and they've chosen that amount because it looks like it gives you quite a bit of benefit, but it's also achievable by people. So if you did more, then you would get more health benefit. But if you look, it's not linear. So the increase, the health benefits are not linear. So where you can see the biggest effect is actually right down at the bottom. So right down here in that circle. So if you have someone who's really inactive, if you can shift them a little bit, that makes a massive difference to their health. So for some of you who feel you're very far away, I wouldn't let that put you off. If you can move yourself up a little bit, that makes a real difference to your health. So how do you measure your activity? Now, hands up who's got a Fitbit or some kind of device. Okay, lots of people. Okay, so Fitbits give you your steps. Yes? Okay, the guidelines, and not all guidelines are in minutes, but our guidelines are in minutes. So how do you know? How does that work? And there's a whole lot of confusion sometimes about the 10,000 steps. So what I'd say to people is find out where you sit at the moment. So what are you doing in your day? And then if you want to try and meet the guidelines, about 3,000 steps is 30 minutes of walking. There or thereabouts. So don't worry about the 10,000. Just try and figure out where you are at the moment, and then you're trying to add that on. And certainly with our clinical populations, we would be starting much lower. What we do is we do what we call this self-efficacy walk, which really is just showing somebody how many steps they can do in 5 minutes. And then we say to them, well, do you think you can fit that into your day? And that's how we set the first step goal, and then very gradually build it up. And it's all about building people's confidence and giving them the tools to actually become active. Now, if you're already doing your 8 or your 10,000 steps, what I'd ask you is, do you know how fast you're going when you're walking? Does your device tell you how fast you're walking? Some of them do, some of them don't. But this is quite a nice little device called Active 10. It's a free app. I've started using it. I really quite like it. So what this app does is it measures all your steps, and it also tells you which are the ones at risk. So for example, I think this morning I did 25 minutes, and 19 of those were brisk steps. And that's really, if you want to get to moderate, that's where you're going to start getting the health benefits. So I think there's a lot of people who've heard the message about stepping, but they might be doing a bit of dawdling. They might not really be walking fast enough. When I'm racing down Grafton Street, I'm sometimes going, a little bit faster. That would be really good for your health. So that's one way, a simple way that people can make a difference to what they're doing. So I'm going to move on to sitting. So I think sitting is the latest thing we have to worry about. And I certainly am one, I meet the physical activity guidelines, but I sit in an office all day. And many of you might be in the same position. And now we have to worry about that as well as everything else. So really what's important is breaking up your sitting time. The challenge that we have is, you're all sitting. We spend our days sitting. Our whole environment is designed for sitting. So I think there's something that needs to change. We need to be more innovative about how we design our working lives. I think that we can integrate sitting. It's easier to do it at work. So this is one of the staff in the physiotherapy school. And this is a little device that sits on her desk, and then she can move it up and down. So it gives her an opportunity to break up her day. Centralising of photocopiers and waste paper baskets, some of you might have really complained about that. Again, brilliant opportunity to get out of your office. Don't go to the closest photocopier, go to the one the next level up. And there are the little changes that you can make to start being active. I think the big thing we have to worry about is, we'll blame Netflix and Amazon Prime, is the binge watching when we go home in the evening and we're sitting for long periods of time. So I think that's where we were probably more challenged about breaking up our sitting. Now, in terms of the evidence for prolonged sitting, we don't actually know enough. And if you look at the guidelines, they don't actually tell you how much or how little you should be doing. Now, there are a couple of, these are all small studies that have shown effects of prolonged sitting on things like your cholesterol and your blood sugar. but they're all too small for them to go into the guidelines to give us advice about what we should do. Now, there is one recent study that has come out, though, that's looked at the data for over 1 million people. And what this study has shown is that if you sit for 8 hours in your day, that will increase your mortality risk, particularly if you do very little physical activity. So, and the only way to offset that is to do 60 minutes of exercise in a day. So in this big study, they followed people, big prospective studies over time. So in lots of different countries, they followed people over time, and they categorized them into the people who were least active and the people who were most active, and then how much sitting they did. So if you're the person who's doing 60 minutes every day, then you don't need to worry so much about the mortality risk of sitting. If you're somebody who does less than 5 minutes of physical activity in a day and is forced for whatever reason to sit, maybe it's your job, to sit for 8 hours in a day, that's probably not good for your health. So I think the key thing is really try and break up your sitting. So the final thing I'm going to talk about then is just building strength. So this has always been in the guidelines. But they've put it now, and these are the UK guidelines, but the Irish guidelines are and these are probably just most recent guidelines, which is why I'm using them. They put strength right in the middle to try and emphasize that. So, and what they're saying is muscular strength on at least 2 days of your week. So strength starts to decline. Now, I have to say, I read something else recently after I had put the slide up that said decline happens in your 50s. But at midlife, your muscle strength starts to decline. So to counter that, then you need to start building strengthening into your day. Now, that's particular relevance if you're getting a little bit older, because we know if your strength decreases, then you're increasing your risk of falls. So what the guidelines are saying is doing things like going to the gym. You might not be a gym person. You don't have to go to the gym. You maybe do yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi. There are lots of other options. Or even the simple thing. My latest thing is I used to complain about having to carry my bag, my suitcase. Now when I go to the train station, I take the opportunity to carry it up the stairs. And I go, that's great. That's a little bit of strengthening that I've built into my day. This is really probably helpful. This comes from the older adult guidelines. And again, I'm just going to come around here just so I can talk you through it. So what this is looking at different forms of exercise. And just again, I'm just going to orientate you. So along the top, I'm just trying to find my light. Yes, okay. So along the top here, we've got the type of sport, physical activity or exercise. We have improvement in muscle strength, improvement in bone health, improvement in balance. 3 stars means there is strong evidence for it. 2 stars means medium, and 1 star means low. Now, what this is telling you at the moment is what are the ones that would hit all of those. So if you want to both improve your muscle function, improve your bone health, and improve your balance, and I've circled those ones. So things like resistance training, aerobics, ball games, racket sports. I think the thing is, I'd say, is though some of those things might not be things you want to do. And certainly we've done a little bit of work around walking, and even though it doesn't look like walking, say, doing much for balance, some of the work we're starting to show suggests that actually it might have a positive effect. So this will probably change over time. But this is useful for those of you who are trying to build all of those 3 things. And if you happen to play tennis, then that's great, because you're actually doing all 3. So we're going to go back to Mentimeter. So if you want to pick up your phones again. A bit like the back pain one. Okay, so that's quite interesting. Time and work seem to be the big ones coming out there. So I guess that says something too about how we are designing our lives, that work seems to be encroaching on everything else. Okay, so I'm going to come out of that now. So this is one of those things. I thought maybe pain might be one of your barriers, but it didn't really come out. But I'm going to just talk about this briefly, because certainly from the work that I do, often the reason people say to us why they can't be active is because they're pain. And I just want to very briefly say, to give people a really clear message, that pain should not stop you being active, okay, within limits. So often, and a lot of the stuff I see on websites, they will say, if you feel pain, stop exercising or stop being active. That's actually not the message. The message is, if you have a little bit of pain, as long as you are in the green or the yellow arrows, that's fine. And I'm just going to explain that to you so everybody's just clear, just in case this is an issue for you. So we often measure pain in a 0 to 10 scale, which 0 being no pain and 10 being the worst pain imaginable. So what this is saying to you is, if you are exercising and your pain is changing by 2, that's fine. That means that what you've done is fine. If your pain changes by up to 5, but settles within a day, that's also fine. If your pain is 5 or more, then that suggests you've probably done too much. And often what we find is that's exactly what happens. People don't quite know where to start. They get very enthusiastic. They do too much. Then they have a pain in their knee, and then they're afraid that they're actually doing more damage. So I think the key thing is start small. You can use pain as your guide, but don't worry about the pain. And data from 10,000 people who had osteoarthritis showed an initial increase in pain was entirely normal. So they showed people increase their pain initially, but if they kept up their physical activity, they saw a reduction of 25% in their pain. So often people are fearful about their pain, and I just want to get that message across. That's not something that you need to worry about. Other barriers, and some of those came up. Now, time obviously is a big issue for people, and that's why I'm saying to you, try and integrate it in your day. And it doesn't have to be 30 minutes. It can be small bouts of activity. So it can be a minute here and a minute there. It's all about taking the opportunity to do a little bit more. So often what we find is people say to us, well, I don't have anybody to do it with. Or, I live in an area that's not safe to go out into. So some of the initiatives here, like Couch to 5K, has anybody here done a Couch to 5K? Okay, so not a huge number of people. Now, my friend persuaded me to do it. I wasn't that keen. I don't really like running. But anyway, it was fantastic. And what I'd say to you is, if you're a bit wary of going along to something like that, try and bring a friend with you. But then that leads into the park runs and park walks. And that's just a brilliant community social engagement. It's just fantastic, okay? And then other things you need to think about just are lots of resources in Healthy Ireland. So if you're interested in becoming more active, I'd really strongly recommend you go on to that website. Now, how do you build a habit once you've decided to start? So this is really important. So we know that, sometimes you get badgered by other people. They say, oh, you must be more active. But if you don't want to do it, if you haven't made that decision, then, that's not a good place to be starting. So you need to decide you definitely want to do it. And I think the most important thing is enjoy it. Pick something you enjoy. Don't feel you have to go to the gym. Don't feel you have to, it shouldn't be an uncomfortable thing. It should be something you really enjoy. Set a realistic goal, and if you're not sure where to start, measure what you're doing and then gradually build it up. If you're really, and many of you will do this already, is share your goal with your family and friends. Because then everybody knows you're doing it. So there's a bit of pressure to do it, and also they can help you. And then think about what rewards you might need. So that's quite helpful. It's really important to plan. And particularly if you've got, well, for any of us, but if you've got a health condition in particular, there's all kinds of barriers. Now, for many of you in the room, your big barrier is time. So you need to plan for that. Because changing behaviour, so I'll just show you this, you're not going to decide to become more physically active and straight away you're going to be running a marathon. That's not how it happens. So the diagram over there where you've got the up and down, the seesaw, that's actually how we change our behaviour. And certainly when we're doing stuff with clinical populations, we're actually, if they get a relapse, that's a great learning experience. So we can actually talk them through it and go, well, you know, has this happened before? How might you change that the next time? And that's really important for success. So just to finish then with my take-home message, if you want to improve your health, some activity is better than no activity. Okay, so if you're very far away from 150 minutes, don't let that put you off. Shifting a little will make a big difference. Try and think about building movement into your day rather than thinking it's something that you do separately. Because if we're under time pressure, we're not going to be able to do it. Try and break up your sitting. And if you can fit it in, a bit of strengthening, because it'll give you added bonus. And finally, just choose something you enjoy. And I'm going to finish there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Professor Suzanne McDonough, for that really interesting talk, Sit Less, Move More. And a great simple message there, I think, to take away. Our next speaker is Professor Robert Kelly, and he is going to be speaking on the topic of food for thought, happy, healthy life, and that sounds very nice for all of us. Professor Kelly is, of course, a consultant cardiologist and also an expert in lifestyle medicine. He says his mission is to empower 1 million people to value their health in life as their number one priority. He's an interventional cardiologist who does run a lifestyle medicine clinic and a lifestyle management business. He's a health and motivation coach. He works with the RCSI and the Faculty of Sports Medicine to develop lifestyle medicine education and implementation in healthcare throughout Ireland. And he says personally he would like to try and be as healthy as he can each day by making healthy choices himself as often as he can. I'll let him explain and put him through his paces now. Professor Robert Kelly.
So just little and often steps, as the last speaker said. So thank you very much, Ciara. So I'm going to talk a little bit about nutrition, and the title is Food for Thought, because I'm going to give you a lot to think about in a few moments. So, let me go back one. So the first thing to think about is that we all live in a world at the moment where smoking, alcohol, drugs, our eating habits, our poor physical activity levels, our stress, our poor sleeping habits, our loneliness are the primary causes of death and disability. And as a cardiologist, there's a particular trial, it's called the ASPIRE study, which is a study of all the heart attack patients across Europe. And at 2 years follow-up in this study amongst the Irish population, these are people who've had a heart attack, they've been treated, they've done the rehabilitation program. 2 years on, 50% of that population are still overweight, their blood pressure is not controlled, the diabetes is not controlled. Now, you're all well aware of the situation with the hospital system, but the conditions that we're talking about, the chronic diseases, take up 60% of people who end up in hospital. For the GPs, that's 80% of their workload from day to day. And for the causes of death in this country, that's 70 to 80% of the premature reasons of death are due to completely reversible causes. So in many cases, a lot of the same people end up in hospital year in, year out, and that contributes a huge financial cost to the health system. So on top of that, things just don't get any better here. As the size of the population gets bigger, the age of the population also gets bigger, but the body size of the population seems to be expanding at a much quicker rate than any of the former two. What's most alarming is that 70% of adults in this country will be either overweight or obese within the next 12 to 24 months. And if you want to know what the comparison is like, 25% of the average US state is obese. 31% of the Irish population is obese. And alarmingly so, it's more happening in men than it's happening in women. One of the really interesting statistics in preparing for this talk is that if you live in France or in Belgium, believe it or not, the weight has not changed in 40 years amongst that population. So maybe we should all move to live in France, or maybe we should all learn a little bit about the way the French and the Belgians live. The other great concern around this health problem is the crisis it puts for the medical professionals, including myself and Suzanne and everybody else who's a doctor or a nurse, nutritionist in this room. And that is, we are all suffering from significant stress in the jobs we are trying to do. There's a high level of burnout, there's a high level of suicide, and in reality, it's not just the medical profession, it probably applies to nearly every single person in this room. So that's the great news to start off the talk with. Now, it gets better. So here's the potential. This is probably the most important slide of the whole of my presentation, and you can look at the top corner if you want to and read that. But the reality is, could you imagine a world where you could actually cure cancer, you could cure heart disease, you'd have very little Alzheimer's disease, and there'd be very little mental health. The only mental health issue is everybody would probably be happy. And there'd be no problem getting into hospital. You wouldn't have to queue, there wouldn't be a trolley problem, you could just walk in, see your doctor, you'd be sorted out, you could go home and enjoy your day. And that'd be just because you'd sprain your ankle or something and you need the physio to help you out, or your back might be a bit sore. And in that situation where everybody's truly healthy, they will be genuinely happy and they should really learn how to enjoy themselves. And for those of you who work in busy jobs, your job will become so much more exciting and interesting. You'll actually find yourself working much better. The company will make lots of money. The state will make lots of money. And you know what? We solve all our problems by just these simple steps. And so everybody will love you. Everybody will want to be your friend. And you'll get more attention throughout the whole of your life than you might ever have planned for. And that's the vision that I have in terms of health. And that is a vision that is very possible. That is possible for every single person in this room. But it is totally up to your choice. So let's just start with this particular slide, and that is, it's very important to see what your baseline is like. So some of you will have done things called health risk assessments, either through work or through different engagements with doctors. And I'm going to go through this slide because it is important, and I'm not going to do the computer presentation because that would be a bit unfair. I'm going to be completely unfair and get you to put your hands up. So I'm going to use the microphone here, and I'm going to go to the other side of the room. Sorry now. So those of you who smoke really should leave the room at this stage, because you probably need to have one. Alcohol intake, very popular in Ireland. The recommendation is 10 to 12 units. That means 5 pints, and that is per week, not per night. Or it means 10 to 12 glasses of wine. If you're drinking spirits, remember that the mixer you put in is full of sugar. In terms of eating, this is a particularly interesting one. So this was, I will ask for a show of hands because there's no data protection here. How many people in the room would admit to eating 5 portions of vegetables per day? So Suzanne, what percent is that, you reckon? And how many of you would at least eat 2 portions of fruit per day? That's even better. So Suzanne has covered the physical activity instructions very nicely. One of the other things in physical activity that's useful is to know, how many of you know what your heart rate is? Excellent. It's getting better. How many of you sleep at least 7 hours a night? Uninterrupted. We'll allow you to go to the toilet, but that's it. And, you know, the rest of the questions you can work out in terms of whether you have a very stressful life. You all admitted to that a few moments ago. How sociable you are in terms of getting outside work and meeting your friends. And also, very importantly, how many of you have any medical issues, which is an important thing to consider yourself and whether you're doing anything about it. And it's also particularly important if you have a family history. So, I mean, if your father or your mother has cancer or died of a heart attack, they are medical conditions that you should pay attention to, even though you might say, well, mum was overweight, dad smoked. Now, if, on the other hand, you are completely reckless and you don't believe a word I have to say, how many of you would drive the car down the M50 at over 120 miles an hour? I'll let you answer that question yourself. So, in terms of the reasons why people die in this world, or the reasons why people get sick, I want you to concentrate on the orange grass rather than the blue grass. Because as per my first slide, the reason people get sick is because they smoke, they don't take enough physical activity, they have poor diet habits, and then you get smaller boxes. Now, that slide is from 2000. In 20 years, the situation has got worse. The tobacco consumption is probably a little bit less than it, per reflection of the other slides. But if you want to add in a few other things, stress contributes to about 30% of the morbidity risk. Sleeping habits, for those of you who don't know, if you sleep less than 5 hours a night, you up the risk of having a heart attack by 25%. If you sleep over 9 hours a night, you up the risk by 32%. So this is all good news. So fortunately, and the reason I was introduced as a lifestyle medicine doctor is that I have taken a particular interest in these risk factors and how they can be embraced within medicine. And there is an area of medicine that's called lifestyle medicine. It's been in existence for several years, particularly in Europe and also in the US. And it's actually not anything you don't already know. What's changed is it's become a medical specialty. It's evidence-based. So like the two previous speakers have highlighted, it's all backed by evidence-based clinical research, proven treatments, as opposed to all the stuff that I guess a lot of you consume through other sources like the internet. And the emphasis here is that not only can you prevent things like heart disease and cancer, you can treat them by the lifestyle interventions, and you can reverse some of them. So the other thing to highlight is it's delivered by doctors, not by anybody else. It's a medical specialty. It's like cardiology or anything else. And it's the application of your medical side of things, your behavior, your motivation, your environment. So it's the whole health question. And most importantly, as a doctor, it teaches doctors to look after themselves. So the whole stress issue about self-care. So it's as much that we look after ourselves instead of spending all the time looking after all of you. So the key pillars to consider are already mentioned. They're very obvious. It relates to addictions, alcohol, smoking, and drug consumption, nutrition, physical activity, your sleeping, as we mentioned, and also dealing with your stress, your relationships, your emotional well-being. And some of the evidence to highlight to you is, as a cardiologist, there are two very good heart studies out there. One is called the InterHeart study, and the other is the InterStroke study. And those studies identify that there are significant risk factors that are associated with heart disease and strokes. So if you want to reduce the chance you're going to have a heart problem by 90%, well, then you need to have your cholesterol at a certain level. You need to have your blood pressure reduced. You need not to be smoking. You need your weight at a certain level. You need to be taking the physical activity. You need to eat the fruit and the veg. There's actually great clinical evidence around eating fruit and vegetables, 5 portions of vegetables, that reduce the risk of heart disease, reduce the risk of cancer, and improve the outcomes. So now you're all to go home and have your 5 veg and 2 tonight, all right? And then managing your stress level, and it's all of those factors. It's not one. It's not like you stop smoking, you go into Domino's on the way home and order a pizza and get the Deliveroo fellow around. So the other point to highlight about lifestyle medicine is that if the doctors do this, most patients, and even more patients, will actually do it. So I have managed to do some stuff about living healthy recently and trying to lose weight and trying to take more exercise. And I will honestly say it's had a greater impact on my patients, some of whom are in the room, in terms of the lifestyle habits they've taken on. So, I firmly believe in this, and I know a lot of my patients acknowledge the fact that I'm saying that to them. So the lifestyle interventions are very obvious. I'm not going to go through it again, but I would like to highlight to you that it is a combination of those things. You can't take the approach that you are going to do one and not the other, that you're going to eat very little and you're going to sit at home doing nothing, smoking your cigarettes out because that's how you manage your weight. That's just nonsense. That makes you sick. And, if you're in a stressful situation, and a lot of people are, the problem with time is you work all the time, you have no time for everything else. What you do is you stop going to the gym, you come home late at night, you might have the bottle of wine, you might smoke a few cigarettes, you're up all night doing your work. If some of you work for big international corporations, you have to work during the night as well, and so you give up sleep, and the sleep hours become less and less. And so you can see what's the obvious is going to happen, the cascade gets worse. But if you adopt some of those interventions and you do them together, there is extremely good evidence that you can reverse the heart disease, you can treat the cancer, you can prevent a lot of illnesses. So my topic is primarily around nutrition, but it's also to link it with lifestyle medicine. And as you can see from the infographic, nutrition is a minefield, okay? And my great joy being a cardiologist is I'm only going to tell you about the healthy side and the lifestyle side related to what I do. So the food for thought is as much to make you think about the other aspects of health, but also to inform you a little bit about nutrition. So the reason we all eat is that because the human body can't make enough of what we need, such as your carbohydrates, your proteins, your fats. They all contribute calories, by the way, whereas all the vitamins, minerals, and all the water, which is extremely important, contribute no calories, and so you can take loads of them. And the key to all of this is about having a balance. It's not about one extreme or the other. You won't sustain that, and in truth, that's actually bad for you. What you may not know is that your food consumption contributes to 1/5 of the risk of mortality throughout the whole world. There's a great study in The Lancet last year from the Global Burden of Disease study, which shows that 22% of the world's mortality is a result of eating habits. Now, some of that's not eating anything that's good for you. Some of it's about eating too much. Some of it's not getting access to food. And there's another very good clinical study called the PURE trial, which gets down to the meat of where the issues are. So people are eating too much salt. That probably contributes to a lot of blood pressure. Too much sugar. There's a lot of issues around meat. We'll come back to that. There's not enough fiber in grain, which is a very interesting deficiency in intake. And again, as I mentioned, fruit and vegetables. And, the nutrition habits is what causes, as I said, 1/5 of mortality. But it's a huge factor in getting heart disease, a stroke, cancer, mental health issues, Alzheimer's disease. So when I see patients, the key factor that I want to know about the patients related to their nutrition is summarized on this slide. And this is very practical for you to do at home. If you take a photograph of it, sit down tonight and think about it, or tomorrow. What food are you actually eating? So the triangles or the pyramids and the plates are all available from the likes of the Healthy Ireland websites for clarity in case you can't see that. So what food are you actually eating? What's the type of food? What's the content, the vegetables, the fruits, etc., which is highlighted on the plate. How much are you eating? So the plate is there to emphasize more vegetables, more healthy protein, grains, fruits, and lots of water. One of the recommendations is often you buy a smaller plate at home so that you don't buy a bigger one to try and squeeze in more of those things. And how much are you eating in terms of what the content is will obviously contribute to the calories. A big phase at the moment is about fasting. And fasting is very popular because it's said that if you eat between the hours of 8 to 10 hours, so say 9 to 5, you don't eat again until 9 o'clock the next morning, then that, believe it or not, is extraordinarily good for your health. But obviously it's extraordinarily good for some people's health because some people have medical conditions that you shouldn't be fasting for that length of time. But for diabetes, it's brilliant actually at improving management for diabetes. Some of the questions that come up when I thought was doing this is how fast you're eating. My kids sit down there in front of dinner, everything is gone within 2 minutes to go back and watch Netflix. And so the speed of what you're eating is a very useful technique to teach you to slow down. There are lots of little tricks like mindfulness that you can use, which help you spend more time preparing before you eat your dinner. And it's a great way to influence your capacity not to eat everything that's in front of you. And then, water is so crucial. You want to be drinking at least 2 liters of water every day. Some of you probably eat about maybe 100 mils of water, but you need to be drinking that amount. One of the great tips, I'll come up to the slides for losing weight in a moment, one of the great tips for losing weight is have a pint of water 30 minutes before every meal every day. And that kind of turns your mind on. It'll make you reach the situation where you won't want to eat as much when the mealtime comes around. It's not to say it's to replace the fact that you make up for it in the meal that you're about to eat 30 minutes later. And then clearly, Suzanne highlights, there's lots of other factors. Where you live, you may not be, you may be very close to certain chains like McDonald's, and that might influence your eating habits, or, your level of education, the schooling. But I do try to get to the bottom of that with certain patients to get some insight as to the level of knowledge in terms of dealing with eating as a risk factor for heart disease. And for me, what's really, really important is to be able to relate that to your medical problems. If you have a problem with cholesterol and blood pressure, I really do want to know how much salt you're consuming or how much fast food you're eating. So I'm going to be brief in terms of dealing with weight, and as the infographic showed, it's a huge subject. And obesity is a huge subject, and I'm not going to go into all the detail of obesity, but just to mention that, I know there's a lot of controversy as to whether it's a disease or not, but it is, for the purpose of this presentation, about behavior. And it is about what you're eating, and it is about how much you're eating. But also what's very important is whether you have a medical problem and how you deal with both the obesity, because the medical problem may be the cause of the obesity. So if your thyroid gland is very underactive, sometimes your weight is very difficult to control. One of the things I will say about obesity is it's a huge contributory risk factor for diabetes. And diabetes is one of those conditions in life that causes a lot of involvement with a lot of organs in the human body. In cardiology, it usually creates a lot of heart failure. It creates very bad coronary disease that's very difficult to treat. So if there was any opportunity with diabetes to try and avoid it, well, then most people should try and do that. If you lose weight, and if you lose significant amounts of weight, you can prevent and you can reverse diabetes, specifically type 2 diabetes. And it works, and it's been shown in studies that are out to 5 years at the moment that maintaining that reduction in weight, the diabetes doesn't come back. There's a lot of other diets. You'll all see them: keto, paleo, low carb, this carb, whatever you want. They are popular, but they're not medical diets. And if you have conditions where the weight is an issue and you have other risk factors, then they may not necessarily suit you. Some of those diets put up the fat. If you have a high cholesterol level, that's not really the ideal diet for you to be on. And it's really, really important to keep that in mind, particularly if medical issues. And also, if you're very overweight, your chance of having diabetes and blood pressure increased, and doing some of these diets may not be the most suitable for you. So if you want to lose weight, there are ways to do it. You eat less food, you eat smaller portions. You can go on weight loss programs. There are loads of them out there. The major advantage to a lot of them is they give you support in the form of coaching. And coaching is enormously valuable in helping you both lose weight, but also sustain the change. Some of you asked about where you get the food. You can get access to food through a lot of meal delivery programs. A lot of them aren't in Ireland yet. It is a movement you're going to see coming. It is not about, let's ring Subway through Deliveroo and ask, can I have the new dipper in the tomato ketchup and the new vegetarian roll? That is not what it's about. It's about the fact that some of these will provide low-calorie, healthy meals for people who may not necessarily know what they're going to have to buy, or else so, because of the time issue, may find it's an easier way to manage their weight. Medications, if you see a doctor, may be suitable for some people. And bariatric surgery is an optional treatment for people with obesity who have great difficulty finding response from other interventions. To get bariatric surgery, you have to show that you did try to change your behavior in terms of your food intake, and you have to pass that level of standard before you'll be considered for it. And one of the other things that's really important, and something that's evolving, is the idea of getting doctors to prescribe instructions to patients about losing weight. So if you come to me, I might say, well, I prescribe that you eat broccoli 3 days a week and celery 2 days a week, but being very specific about telling you what to do in an effort, like Suzanne was saying, to change your habit and to try and improve your health. So the other point to emphasize to you is that this works. So food genuinely is medicine, just like exercise is medicine. So if you adopt diets like the Mediterranean diet, which is shown here in the top corner, and I want to emphasize something about the Mediterranean diet. So the Mediterranean diet is a very well-known diet that is extraordinarily good for your health. It's extraordinarily good in terms of preventing heart disease and cancer. But one of the things you should notice about the Mediterranean diet, which really appeals to Irish people, because it's not the American whole food plant one, is the bottle of wine. So, and one of the reasons that the French people, they're very slim, is they still get away with it, but it's a small amount, and it's not every day of the week. The other thing to emphasize is the social interaction at dinner time. So, my younger son rushing away from the dinner, gorging his food, straight onto Netflix, and that's just not a recipe that we want to see from a health point of view. So a lot of the gain in the Mediterranean diet and the benefit in health is felt the fact that you leave your mobile phone behind, you sit down as a family, you talk through your problems, and that is actually part of the health benefit. That's the connectedness, that's the social interaction. Now, the other diet that's increasingly popular, there's lots of good programs on Netflix for those of you, I'm sure many of you have watched it, and I won't advertise it, is the idea of doing a whole food plant-based diet. And a whole food plant-based diet is extraordinarily beneficial to your health. It's one of the best diets there is in terms of reducing your risk for heart disease, for cancer. It's extraordinarily beneficial in terms of improving control of cholesterol, blood pressure, and diabetes. The challenge with it is it excludes meat. Now, some of these diets do allow you to do a small amount of meat, and then we get into the veganism, vegetarianism, which I am not going to talk about. You can all chat about it afterwards. From a medical point of view, there are other diets, some of which may appeal to you very well. So we have the DASH diet, which is a low-dairy diet, low-salt diet, very good for controlling blood pressure. The portfolio diet may appeal to a lot of you. The portfolio diet is a low-cholesterol diet compared with a statin, showing that the low-cholesterol diet does just as well as the statin does. And these are other interventions. The direct trial is the weight reduction diet, going low-calorie for 6 weeks and then increasing the calories to reverse diabetes. The CHIP program are a number of American community health intervention programs which are largely applied in the workplace, showing that if you change your diet, your exercise, and your stress, you have a significant improvement in your health. So it's all really simple. So this is how you do it, as the song goes. I don't need to read this out. You just need to take a picture of it and then start when you start now. So as Suzanne was saying about changing your habits, SMART is an acronym. It's specific, it's measurable, it is results driven, and it's time. So if you want to lose weight, you want to turn around and say, I want to lose 14 pounds of weight in the next 4 weeks by doing such and such. I will check on this every single day and be accountable to that. That's a brilliant way to get a coach to help you lose weight. And that is the only way to do it, because if you say you'll do a bit of this and a bit of that, I guarantee you by the 1st of February, half of you will have failed from what you plan to do on the 1st of January. And you'll be down about 400 euros from what you paid for the gym, and you might use the gym beyond that. You want to plan, you want to prepare yourselves, because if you don't, you'll have great difficulty. By the second day in, you'll be back eating what you were eating. For those of you who like to shop, you want to spend more time at the fruit and vegetable counter and less time at the other counters. Great tip if you want to be serious about losing weight is cook most of your meals for the week on Sunday. So Tupperware is back for those of you who understand that comment. And it's a great way to just plan out so that when you come to lunchtime at work on Wednesday or Thursday, that you're not off to Subway having the veggie roll, because you prepared something and you know what it is and you know exactly what it is and you know it's healthy. And they're just habits to make you change the way you approach things. Keeping a diary every day is extraordinarily valuable. It's very valuable. I get a lot of patients to make a diary for the 2 weeks after they see me, and we come back and discuss what they are eating, because once you have an insight yourself and you know what you're eating, it's amazing if you're to thinking for yourself for a minute and say, do I remember what I had for lunch, dinner, and breakfast a week ago? And most of you won't remember. Mindful eating, I mentioned, drinking lots of water, very important. Staying away from processed foods, they're full of salt, absolutely full of salt. So if you want to know why your blood pressure is up, there's the answer. Alcohol in excess, full of sugar, lots of weight. Sugar in excess, sugar isn't an awful lot of things. If you want to lose weight, great way to do it is stop eating sugar. But sugar, you got to bear in mind, is those of you who do like your glass of wine, there's lots of sugar in it. And the problem is finding sugar, because you won't necessarily find the sugar by adding the sugar. It's usually in something else. Similarly with the salt, breakfast cereal has a ton of salt in it. So, through these things, you want to empty your kitchen of any distractions. So do not hide the ice cream in your fridge, just in case. And do not hide lots of other sweets and things around the house so that you can get to them when you're getting your cravings. The approach I often recommend is you follow 3 meals per day. You take a small snack between each. That might be a few nuts. The fasting we mentioned, give yourself a chance, and then as you move along, add the lifestyle. So it was asked about the exercise. You add the exercise as you go along. It's wonderful to keep the weight off. For those of you who are under 40, you can run around, do all these Coach to 5Ks, and you probably will lose weight. For all of us who are over 40, it's 80% food intake, 20% exercise. Unless you want to run the marathon every day and you'll just burn everything off. But that's not a good thing for your health. And then the other aspect is get the family and the friends involved, because they will help you. Don't be embarrassed. It's one of those things that you hide from the family. You don't want them to know what you're up to. It's your big secret. And then the reality is you just fail at it, but they never knew anyway, so there's nothing to hide. Make sure you have other plans in place to get you out of the problem. So, for example, you come home at night, you're late, and you're kind of going, I should be out for the walk for an hour. So just don't sit around the kitchen and go for the ice cream, go for everything else. Have the guts to get up, just put down what you've had for dinner, leave, and go out for the walk. When you come back, you won't feel hungry. And so there's loads of other things to try and help you to minimize relapsing, from using trackers, Fitbits, whatever you want. There's lots of online coaching services. Some are very, very good. The NHS is a particularly good one at the moment. But ultimately, you want to try and keep your own control, motivate yourself, and take it slowly. You're not going to lose 15 stone in the space of a month. If you lose 15 stone in the space of a month, I'm afraid I have really bad news for you. It'll all come back again. So there's another weight reduction program in the US called The Biggest Loser. It's all about losing tons of weight. The problem is when you lose tons of weight quickly is your stomach reacts to it. Your brain starts producing hormones that make your appetite increase. And therefore, after doing The Biggest Loser for a couple of weeks, you increase your body weight straight back to where you were. So you've got to do everything slowly. Ideally, other people say if you're kind of targeting about 2 or 3 pounds a week, you can work out the maths. If you do it for a year, you've lost 100 pounds, if you're that good. So the reality is that you can get the weight up much more effectively that way. Time will help you to sustain your habits, and therefore you have a much better chance of becoming more healthy. So on the right-hand side is to reflect what you need to do to sustain your habits. So unfortunately, only a few people manage to succeed, but there's no reason why more can't succeed if you just try. The other point to emphasize to you is the need for the exercise. Be warned that 6 to 12 months you tend to hit plateaus. So you want to be aware that 6 months after you've been doing this, that somebody's there to help you out, or that you're prepared, maybe you want to do a couch to 5K within that period of time. And then you want support, friends, family, whoever it is, just to kind of get you through those episodes. You want to give yourself a little reward. Now, that's not an Easter egg, all right? It might be a little holiday to a yoga camp or something like that. Or a walk on the beach. And then don't beat up on yourself. You know what I mean? People do go to parties, and you do have a bar of chocolate, and you do have a drink. And if you're on a nutrition program for the week before, that's fine. But the day after the party, you're back on the nutrition program. It's not that the party becomes a long period of time. One of the relapse challenges I used to observe in practice are patients going to weddings, because weddings used to take 3 days. And so when they came back having consumed so much alcohol and food, that they found great difficulty to go back on the program. One of the interesting things on the slide is to show you of an American study called the National Weight Control Registry. You know, if you want to sustain big reductions in weight over a period of time, there's certain key messages, one of which is eating your breakfast. A lot of people skip their breakfast thinking they'll lose more weight. It's actually very bad for you. Not watching television or spending less time in front of TV, and I would say that applies to Netflix as well, unless you're watching some of those programs. And then taking regular exercise on a daily basis. So I have 2 slides, and I'll speed up here. This one is targeted at the medics in the room, okay? So, I mean, I'm a cardiologist. I see lots of patients with heart disease. I would much prefer if my patients could be made completely better. But we have a long way to go in terms of achieving that. But the ACC is the American College of Cardiology, and this year they've come out with a statement to encourage the cardiologists of the world to try and get their patients more healthy, as opposed to practice palliative cardiology. Palliative cardiology is you have heart disease, you take tablets for the rest of your life. So we want to try and empower doctors to do more, both for themselves, because if I do more, patients tend to do more, if other doctors do the same, and it's not about doing a lot of extra work, it's about just being more healthy yourself, practicing what you preach. The challenge with doctors is we're brilliant at looking after patients, we're just not very good at looking after ourselves. And so there is a need for us to change a little bit the way we do. We need to learn more about this topic. We need to become more skilled in coaching patients. And we also need to engage in things like prescribing these interventions for patients. So on the bottom left-hand corner is what a food wellness prescription looks like, okay? And I think it's very important that we all work together. I'm sure there's lots of nutritionists and physiotherapists and other stakeholders in this room. I, as a doctor, can't do all this. I can't treat all the patients in the world with this. I need lots of other people working with me. That's why I set up a service with a nutritionist from my practice, because I couldn't get the patients to lose weight. I tell them, go off to the nutrition program, go off to motivation, whatever it is, come back a year later, twice the size. So what did you do? Well, you know, Dr. Kelly, I'm very busy, don't have the time, blah, 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 Christmas, whatever. And then ultimately I discovered the only way to get the patients to lose weight was either to hold their hand or to do it for them. So at that point, I just decided to bring a nutritionist on board to help me try and address those patients. And it's worked very successfully, but it still has a lot of challenges. But it is the only way to truly work with people. So my bottom line message to you is, as a group, and it applies to everybody and to your family and to your friends, that I hope that I've showed you how serious the situation is with health in general and your personal health, and that how all of the reasons that that is happening are totally reversible and totally with your own hands as to whether you want to change that. You know, it's up to you as to where the way you want to live your life or what your purpose in your life is. But if you want to be healthy and well and live a long life, which I believe most people do, but then you have to look after yourself. And to do that, you have to look after all aspects of your health, and you have to take responsibility and make healthy choices about what you eat in terms of taking some level of exercise. You've been told you can start small, but you have to try and do something better every day. And ultimately, that's what will create your health and your happiness. It won't come from doing quite the opposite. And I think that we're all responsible. It's not just the audience. It's as much the medical profession. It's as much everybody else. I mean, One of the interesting things is we all wear seatbelts driving our cars. At least most of us do. And yet our health we do very little for. So I think it's really important that we kind of put our health first. It's really my driving mission to try and get as many people to do that as possible, because I see a lot of people with heart attacks. I see young patients with heart attacks. I see people who drop dead. And I see that regularly, and it's just so disappointing for the things, because those people could have had such a different outcome. And I do want to highlight one thing on the slide, and that is, you know, where we're all very motivated, we do these walks. If any of you know Oklahoma City in the US, it has a certain amount of claims to fame, but it's a relatively small city. So at the present time, it's a population of about 1.5 million people. So our small little country of about 4.5 million people could learn a lot from Oklahoma. So in 2013, the mayor of Oklahoma had a weight problem, and he lost 30 pounds of weight. And he was so incredibly motivated by that, because Oklahoma was the fattest city in America. So he set up a challenge called the £1 Million Challenge, which was to get the population to lose £1 million of weight. And they achieved that through getting 55,000 people to lose weight. It's an ongoing process, and the pounds are converted into dollars and reinvested in healthcare in the community of Oklahoma City. That's just a little bit of food for thought to leave you all with. So thank you very much.
And on that note, can I first just thank all of you for coming out this evening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and my sincere thanks to Professor Robert Kelly, Professor Suzanne McDonough, and Professor Kieran O'Boyle. And for me, Dr. Ciara Kelly. I feel like a serious underachiever in this room, but thank you all very much.
Thanks, Ciara. So just before you go, very briefly, can I add my thanks to that before you rush off briskly home for your broccoli bake? Can I add my thanks? It's been a fantastic evening. I want to particularly thank Professor Suzanne McDonough and Professor Robert Kelly for really enlightening talks. The RCSI takes this part of healthcare extremely seriously. I was once told by a colleague of mine in St. James's that if I wanted to improve my lifestyle, I had to remember the 3 F's. Feet, fork and fingers. Move your feet more, use your fork less, and don't use your fingers to either smoke or drink too much alcohol. Right? He also said to me, the same chap, he had a right sense of humour, he said, Kieran, if you don't take care of yourself, the Undertaker will take that responsibility for you. So we wish you safe home. The next of these nights is on the 27th of February, and it will be on tobacco and alcohol. We look forward to seeing you then. And can I finally express our real gratitude to Ciara Kelly, who I think has done a splendid job here for us this evening. Thank you very much, Ciara. Thank you all.